Okay, so hello. The focus of discussion for this week is on the introduction of the subject itself, which is environmental science and engineering. So we are going to understand what is the relevance of environmental science and engineering on the practice of civil engineering or in being civil engineers in the future. So we have to understand the entire concept of this subject. So the first topic we have to consider will be focusing on the environment, ecosystems, and biodiversity. So here are some of the following definitions we have to understand before kita magsulod gid sa concept sa environmental science and engineering. So environment is the first word nga makita naton sa aton nga subject, environmental science engineering. So we have an environment. Environment is derived from French word environ, which means to encircle or to surround. Environment is sum total of the water, the air, and the land, interrelationships among themselves and also with the human beings, other living organisms, and property. So the above definition given in Environment Act 1986 clearly indicates that environment includes all the physical and biological surroundings and their interaction. So bisan natawon pa naton sa basic naton nga understanding based on the basic sciences naton nga mga subject. So bisan sa elementary pa ni ari na ni ang concept of environment and the subject about environment. So medyo siguro balikan lang na naton yung mga concept or strengthen pagid natin ang concept or idea about sa environment. So environment, syempre mahamba kita environment that is composed of living and non-living things. And we have to understand the relationship kung paano nila gina-influence ang isa kag isa. So also, based on the subject naton, we have environmental science and engineering. We have to differentiate kung anong kinalain sa environmental science with environmental engineering. So environmental science, the study of biotic and abiotic components and its relationship. So we have environmental science. So, ang nakabutang naman diri about environmental engineering. So, this includes the protection enhancement, quality, public health, welfare, and environment. So, we also have environmental studies and education. So, educating people, preserving quality environment. So, if we are going to look at sa duwa diri ka term, we have environmental science and we have environmental engineering. So anong pinalain nila nga duwa? So probably we have to establish kung ano gid ay bala ang kinalain nila nga duwa because they are, yes, they are related. Mayara sila overlap siguro probably, and that's why I have here I research kung ano ang kinalain or ano ang um, similarities, differences kung overlap sa environmental science and engineering. So environmental science and environmental engineering share some basic similarities. So to begin, and perhaps most importantly, both areas of studies are concerned with the natural environment and its relationship with the human world. Siyempre, based on the term itself, pakitaan nato nga pareho sila focusing on the environment kay environmental science, environmental engineering. So, ang focus nila is to study sa natural natin ng environment kung paano siya ma-relate or anong iya relationship with the human world. So, both environmental scientists and engineers, so amo ning tawag sa nagapractice ng environmental engineering ug environmental science. So, we have environmental scientists and we have also environmental engineers. They focus on the data nga ginagather from the natural environment, particularly on the past and future effects of human activity and its impact, in order to devise and implement solution to the variety of issues. So, syempre, before ka magkanda o before ka maghimo or will make actions. So you have to conduct experiments and gather data. So amo ni ang ginagabasihan sang parehas nga environmental engineer ka man or environmental scientist. So your actions or your paghimuon nga mga activity or kung ano man ang steps ni himuon nimo, it should be based on the data gathered halin sa ato natural environment. So beyond that, however, this path begins to diverge. Although it's fair to say that they are complementary and may share the same ultimate nga goal or goals, like any scientist, kabalo kita, ang kinalain nila nga duwa is despite the fact that they are focusing on environment itself is ang next word. So ang kinalain is the scientist and engineer. So magambag kita environmental scientist bisan ano pa na siya, it is related to science. It is generally tasked with performing research for a specific project, gathering data provided by the natural environment. So, focusing on certain issues such as environmental degradation, kag ano nang iyang effect sa human nga activity and the given area nga which is the environment na ginafokusan nato. An environmental scientist may then analyze this data and further provide a recommendation to be implemented in order to facilitate change or enact future nga mga benefits. So, parehas sang mga ginahimo sang bisan anuman nga type of scientist or any nga mga scientist same lang man na Japan ang concept of work sang environmental scientist. So they have to gather data, they have to analyze data, they have to perform experiment, and then amo nang ilang analyze specifically ang focus nila lang galing sa environmental scientists is on the environment, ano ang nanging effect sa mga human activities, kag ano pa ang mangin effect sini sa tao. So, okay, so sa nakita natin nga picture kung paano nag-work ang environmental scientist after nila perform sang data gathering experiment and pag-analyze sa tanan nga data, that is after sinaanong matabo, diri na dahil masulod ang ginatawag natin ng mga environmental engineers. So, environmental engineer steps in this part of the process. Once provided with data, an analysis and recommendation by a scientist, an engineer begins to use his or her knowledge of both engineering and environmental science in order to apply it toward a plan and a solution. So, dali na kita dahil take part and ang kung ano man ang conclusion or kung ano man ang outcomes sang nanging experiment sa mga environmental scientists, dali na dayon mabulig, dali na dayon ma-take part ang environmental engineers. So, ang himuon sa mga environmental engineers, they are going to include some planning for probably new infrastructure to limit sang effects sang syempre ginatanaw din naton effects ng human activity on a specific space or even shaping a plan to ensure nga ang given area of concern natin is rapidly developed to allow for a human use. So, medyo nakita na naton nga ang whole picture starts with the study of the environment. So, studyhan sa mga environmental scientists, then kung ano man ang ilang nga data, buligan, adayon, na dayon masulod ang environmental engineers. Ultimately, these two fields of study can be largely understood and differentiated through their related terms, the science and engineering. So, amo ning gina-mention ginaton specifically, an environmental scientist will work like any other scientist in the field nga kinahanglan nila mag-gather, mag-analyze ang set of data to provide answers sa certain questions. In contrast, ang mga environmental engineer, they will utilize the host of engineering principles. So, ang ilang sa just like any practice of engineering, they will create a plan of action using information you can provide sa mga scientists. Of course, these two fields of study are both concerned with the same end goal of answering questions or providing solution to problems related syempre sa environment, which again highlights the significant overlap between the two fields. So, subong we were able to establish na kung ano ang kinalain nga, di ba? Kung ano ang um, difference between environmental engineering and environmental science. So, we have also to understand ano ang scope anong scope ng study natin as we go on with understanding the environmental science and engineering. So the scope of environmental science is broad. Some of the aspects of the scope of environmental science includes this one, studying the interrelationship among biotic and abiotic components for sustainable human ecosystem. So this will be discussed in the next natin yung mga discussion video. What is the relationship? What are the components of different ecosystems? For example, ara ka sa desert, anong makita mo? Dara nga biotic and abiotic component. Example, you are in a grassland. Ano ang makita nimo dara? Ara ka sa forest, for example, ano makita nimo nga biotic and abiotic component? So, um, istudihan na siya nato isa-isa. Tanan-tanan ang types of environment, marine ecosystems, sa ocean man da siya, sa tanan ang types of environmental ecosystem. So kinahanglan naton tan-awon anong iya components, anong iya nga pag ano na dang mga biotic kag abiotic components, and then ano ang interrelationship between sa sini nga mga components. So next, carrying out impact analysis and environmental auditing for further catastrophic activities. So we have to understand ano ang impact, especially sa mga human activities nga ginahimo naton. Kung ano ang probable or what will be the effect nga madulot sini sa aton nga environment. Next, developing and curbing the pollution from existing and new industries. So, isa sa mga scopes ng environmental science and engineering, the goal dapat is to avoid, to help reduce kung hindi magid ma-avoid ang pollution. So there is a specific part of the discussion later on wherein we are going also to focus on different types of pollution. Kag kung ano ang iyang mga effect sini sa environment, sa taho, sa the way of life sang mga nag-a-start in specific areas. Next, we have to understand that stopping the use of biological and nuclear weapons for destruction of human race. Next, managing the unpredictable disasters and so on. So we have in the last part or in the latter part of this entire discussion, we are also going to study some sari-sari yung mga disasters and how are we going to prepare for such disasters. So there are some major issues like global warming, depletion sa atong ozone layer, dwindling forests and other resources, loss of global biodiversity, and others that are going to affect the mankind as a whole. And for that, we have to think globally. So, mo nga itong gid nga concern subong why we need to study for environmental science and engineering. And most especially in the overall nga uh, relations ini sa aton nga course environmental science and engineering, we have to study this because as an engineer, whether we practice mantaya environmental as environmental engineers in the future or not, still we are engineers and we will be having some ginatawag natin yung mga projects later on. So if we will be practicing, for example, civil engineer. So kung mag-civil engineer ka or for example sa amon field electronics engineering, so we will be having projects later on. And ang tanan nga project, especially gid sa field sang civil engineering, kinahanglan studihan ni naton kung ano ang mga impact niya. So, sa environment, ano ang mga impact niya sa taho, ano ang mga impact niya sa the way of life sa mga living kag non-living man ng mga um, components ng specific na environment. That's why we have also to consider in the somewhere the last part sa aton nga discussion, the environmental impact assessment sa mga projects nga himuon naton as engineers. So, one of my friend naghambal siya nga ah, sa ila ko ng masteral, dun pa ginpaubra sila sa environmental impact assessment nga nga study. And hamba ko sa amon nastudihan na namon sa college years pa lang. So probably because lain siguro nga curriculum. So that's why sa subong nga curriculum, this one was presented na sa masteral nga part. But we are still lucky because I included sa sini nga discussion nga dapat may gid sa environmental impact assessments, the steps kung paano na siya i-conduct. And ako dapat kung anong unod sa specific process na ginahimo when we are conducting environmental impact assessments. So, I do hope lang kabay pa malambutan na naton and we will have enough time to discuss ang tanang part of the environmental impact. So, there is a importance kung maghambal kita if you will be talking about environment because kabalo kita sa nagkakatabo subong. So we are aware nga may uh, may nagkakatabo nga daw hindi na naton maintindihan pati sa aton nga environment. So this needs for public awareness. So, public awareness is very essential to help understand kung ano ang pros kag cons sa ating mga environmental problems. So, it was stated that the United Nations Conference on Environment and Development held in Rio de Janeiro in 1992 and popularly known as the Earth Summit, followed by the World Summit on Sustainable Development in 2002, have highlighted the key issues of global environmental concern. Environmental pollution cannot be removed by laws alone. So the proper implementation and especially public participation are important aspects. So public participation is possible only when the people is aware about the ecological and environmental issues. So a drive by the government to ban the littering of uh, polythene cannot be successful until the public understands the environmental implications of the same. So the public has to be educated about the fact that if we are degrading our environment, we're actually harming ourselves. So this is the very important part of dissemination man siguro or awareness ng mga tao. So probably we are aware sa nagkakatabo sa kalibutan, but we are still continuing sa ating mga practices wala nga ginahimo. And we have to understand this. Um, probably, ang concern diri is ang human activities gid nga ginahimo naton. So, that's why may mga ara kita sa mga nag-work in a specific nga department sa government in order to inform us or hindi man informed probably aware na kita sini but to constantly remind us of the importance sa mga practices nga ginahimo naton diri sa uh, aton nga sa aton sa mga ginahimo sa para sa aton day to day life. So next naton nga discussion would focus on the concept, structure, and components of ecosystem. So, medyo baliktarin naton. This is the concept nga na-discuss na sa aton even in the elementary years. So, the concept of ecology and ecosystem. So, ecology is the study of the distribution and abundance of organisms, the flow of energy and materials between abiotic and biotic components of the ecosystem. So, maghamba kita ecology. So, that is the branch of science nga nag-study siya sa aton nga ecosystem kung um, paano ang relationship, paano ang flows ng energy sa materials from abiotic kag biotic components of the ecosystem. So in general, this focuses on the interrelationship between sa aton living kag non-living part or components ng aton ecosystem. So maghambak kita ecosystem, the living things in a given area, non-living chemical and physical factors of their environment linked together through nutrient cycle and energy flow. So ecosystem is the kung paano na sila tanan interrelate. So ang ecology is the study of sa atong ecosystem. So aware na kita bisan man siguro sa sa aton lang wala own understanding that there are two types of environment. So ang two types of environment nga kinahanglan natin i-consider, we have syempre number one is natural. Natural, biotic and abiotic nga environment. So this includes probably sa mga natural resources nga kita naton like soil, water, air, mga trees, so even mga noises pa naga-create that is a natural nga environment. And because we have natural environment, ang isa niya ka-type is the man-made environment. Most powerful environment agent. So, this includes, syempre, ang mga ginubra lang ng tao like the house, roads, schools, railways. So, they are part of the environment, pero man-made na sila. So, this environment nga ginmention naton would be composed of different components, and this include number one, we have the abiotic component, or that means they are non-living or physical nga parts sang ecosystem naton. So this could be present sa aton hydrosphere, atmosphere, lithosphere. So Um, pero non-living sila nga part or components ng ecosystem. We also have the biotic or the living organism. So, syempre, living organism, so they are included sa biosphere naman siya. Next, we have energy component or mga energy flow. This is also part sa aton nga component sa aton nga environment. Okay, so we have to run through lang ang sini nga part. So, structure sa component structure or components ng ato nga ecosystem. So first, for the ecosystem structure, the living component of the ecosystem. Roles ng aton nga organism sa aton nga ecosystem, it could either be nabalaan ni nato. Halimpas ang una, we have producers, consumers, and decomposers. So mga producers, so they make food, plants, or such as plants and algae, mga consumers, basta nag-eat sang other nga organisms, consumers ng tawag sa ila. We also have the composers. They eat dead organic matter, bacteria, and fungi. So maghambak kita, decomposers, so still present sila sa ating ecosystem, and they contribute sa ating ecosystem. So, bisan ano pa na daang siya nga type of organism, still it is a part sa atong ecosystem. So, since we mentioned about the consumers, may sari-sari kita nga type of consumers. So, we have herbivores, we have carnivores, and we have omnivores. So, ang herbivore, so they are primary consumers, so nag-eat sila sa plants. Carnivores naman, they are secondary consumers, they are meat eaters, or nagakaon sila sa mga herbivores. So, tertiary naman, they feed on carnivores. So, or mayara man kita sang omnivores nga ang ginakaon nila is either plants or animals. So, we have also considered sa mga organisms na ginahambal naton. So there are three types of organisms that we need to understand. First, we have the scavengers. They feed on dead organisms. So example, sini mga vultures, flies big o mga langaw da ang kakita naton, crows. So they are scavengers. Next, we have the detritus ng mga feeders. So they are organisms that extract nutrient from fragments of dead organisms into more simple organic waste. So, kung ano tong mga extract or kung ano to ang mga waste sa mga dead organism ang nila ginakaon. So, this includes mga termites, earthworms, so crabs. So, they are the detritus feeders. We have also the composers. They are organisms that digest parts of the dead organism into simplest chemicals. So, this includes mga bacteria, kag fungi. Okay, so this is for the entire introduction of the whole natin nga discussion. So, for the first part of the discussion pero natin we have covered na sang almost the coverage sang prelim because sulit-sulit naman siya Japon in the next naton nga discussion about the different type of ecosystem. Still the same lang man ni Japon nga topic sa aton i-discuss. But we have to dig deeper lang into the different concept or different components lang sa sari-sari ng mga ecosystems. So for this discussion, we are already okay. So we have to continue the discussion na lang in the next nga Google Meet natin. So this is it for now. Thank you. Stay safe. God bless.